Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chaitanyam sarvagam sarvam sarvaguhashayam yat sarva vishayatitam tasmai sadvade namaha. Om. Good. Nice to see all of you for our weekly class, and welcome also to the many students attending these classes online. We'll continue our study today of Shankara's Upadesha Sahasri, chapter after chapter. Quite brilliant. The main topic throughout all these chapters and the hundreds and hundreds of verses, there are many topics. The main topic, not surprisingly, is atma-vichara, self-inquiry. If you ask what is the main, quote, practice of Advaita Vedanta, the answer has to be atma-vichara, self-inquiry. And the reason for that is, just to review what you already know, as we've said many times, Vedanta is not a philosophy. We're not interested in the pursuit of philosophical wisdom. The whole focus here is to solve the problem of human suffering, a problem we're all pretty familiar with. And so we're not interested in philosophical information, ideas, and doctrines. Secondly, turns out, and this is the underlying thesis, if we can call it that, on which the entire teaching of Vedanta is based. Suffering is due to your failure to recognize that your essential nature is consciousness, consciousness that remains utterly unaffected by the problems of your body, problems of your mind, and problems outside. Let's be very clear. Sorry. The consciousness we're talking about is a consciousness present in your experience right this moment. Turns out that you don't fully understand the nature of that consciousness. You may think it's born and subject to death. You may think it's affected by whatever happens in your mind. All of these are wrong conclusions. The purpose of Vedanta is to address the wrong conclusions you have about yourself as a conscious being. And it turns out all of our suffering is due to those wrong conclusions. You remove the wrong conclusions and you remove this suffering. Those of you who know a little bit about this cognitive behavioral therapy, the cognitive part is very similar to what we just said. In a psychological way, you suffer. In a psychological way, you suffer because of your wrong conclusions about yourself. Like when somebody says, "No one likes me," that kind of thing. It's a wrong conclusion. And it's a wrong conclusion that causes lots of suffering. So a cognitive therapist will help you remove those wrong conclusions, to remove suffering at a purely psychological level. Here, we're removing suffering at a very profound, complete level. Okay, again, we're removing suffering by addressing wrong conclusions about ourselves, and that is atma-vichara. And one of the wrong conclusions we make about ourselves is that this consciousness, which is our essential nature, goes away in deep sleep. This is conventional wisdom, that you cease to be conscious in deep sleep or under anesthesia or coma or a variety of conditions. And it seems intuitive at first sight. And the more you think about it, the more you discover it's wrong. And that's what Shankara is going to address here. And the basic principle is this. You think your consciousness is ordinary. You've heard me use this language before. You think, you believe, wrongly believe that your consciousness is ordinary. And just like everything else, it comes and goes. It's subject to change. The ancient rishis discovered you're wrong. And what we're going to see is that consciousness, your true essential nature, is not ordinary at all. It's extraordinary. And that's what we see, where we pick up the thread here in verse 18. Na drishtir lupyate drashtush, na drishtir lupyate drashtush, chakshuradir yataivatu, chakshuradir yataivatu, nahi drashturiti hyuktam, nahi drashturiti hyuktam, tasmad drashta saraikadrika, tasmad drashta saraikadrika. Very good. Nahi na drishtihi drashtuhu lupyate, na lupyate. Drishti here means consciousness. Drashtuhu means literally, drishti means seeing. Drashtu means seer. But we use these words in metaphoric sense commonly. So drishti, literally seer, but here consciousness. Drashtuhu, seer, but in context, you, the awareful witness, the one who knows what's happening in your mind right now. And Shankara begins by saying, drashtuhu, for you, the awareful observer, for you, drishtihi, consciousness or awareness, and we use these words synonymously, consciousness or awareness, na lupyate, never ceases, is never interrupted. Your consciousness continues to reveal the activities of your mind without interruption under any conditions whatsoever, even if that condition is death. Consciousness continues to illumine. So in deep sleep, we've had this discussion so many times, and that's a very important discussion. In deep sleep, your consciousness shines as brightly, if I can use that metaphor. Your consciousness shines as brightly in deep sleep as it does right now. The difference, of course, is a condition of your mind. If your mind is perfectly silent, you're conscious, but there's nothing to be conscious of. And you've heard my favorite metaphor many, many times. If you stand in a perfectly dark closet with your eyes open, you see nothing, because as soon as you went into that closet, you became blind, right? Absurd. Your ability to see doesn't blink on and off. Why should it be different with consciousness? Just as in a dark closet you see, but there's nothing to be seen, in the same way in deep sleep, you're conscious, there's nothing to be conscious of, And the same is true of anesthesia, coma, and even death. Consciousness continues. Na lupyate. It never ceases. And he gives a counterexample here. Chakshuradehe yata eva tu. So that tu gives you the sense of the counterexample. It says yata eva, just like in the case of the chakshuhu, eyes. And it's a counterexample. So your eyes, your eyesight, and a very interesting metaphor. You blink your eyes, right? Close your eyes. I'm gone. I'm not gone, but you get the idea. Your eyesight can indeed be interrupted. All you have to do is close your eyes. And this is the counterexample. Your eyes blink. Consciousness doesn't blink. Very nice. Now, this is a little bit more of an advanced class, so let's take an extra step here that Shankara doesn't directly refer to, and that is there are certain philosophies that suggest consciousness might blink. And before I give you the details, let me just give, this is a really nice metaphor. When you watch television, you may not know the fact that what you're watching is 30 still images alternating every second. Every second you get 30 still images. For our students overseas, mostly it's 25 images. I happen to know all these details because of video production. 25 images per second. So you're not seeing content. In fact, in between those images, there can be a moment of darkness. Blink. I don't think you can blink 30 times a second. But if you could, that would kind of represent what you see on the television. And the point I'm making here is television, even though it's blinking 30 times a second, so to speak, you experience it as being continuous. So the point I'm leading up to here is, how can we be so sure that consciousness doesn't blink? And blink, but it blinks rapidly enough that we don't know it's blinking, like the television. Now, this, if you think this is a modern argument, you'd be wrong, because it's not based on televisions. It's based on a school of Buddhism known as Vijnanavada. There are many schools of Buddhism. One of them likes this metaphor of consciousness blinking rapidly. It's called kshanika vijnana. Vijnana here means consciousness. Consciousness which is kshanika, momentary. And usually gets translated into English as flickers of consciousness. So, according to this one school of Buddhism, what you think is continual consciousness, according to these Buddhists, it's actually flickers of consciousness. Basically, every time a vritti arises, you get a flicker of consciousness. When that vritti resolves, that flicker goes away. Then comes rapidly the next vritti. So you have so many vrittis coming and going. Each vritti is accompanied by this so-called flicker of consciousness. Because they're coming rapidly enough, it gives you the illusion of continuity. It's pretty good. So I don't know, I wonder if that inspired the television technology. Their ideas of flickers of, I don't know. Definitely not. There is lots of, anyway, just being a little bit silly. Okay, how do we know that's not the case? From your experience alone, can you be sure? One topic we've discussed here so many times is that experience fools us all the time. How many times have you watched the sun go down? 0. So, and enough said, we won't go through all of that again. So experience alone is not sufficient to tell us if consciousness is continuous or if consciousness comes in discrete flickers. So then how do we handle this contention of the Buddhists? And it's a serious contention. You can't deny that. And by the way, there are brilliant Buddhist scholars from roughly maybe 500 BCE, somewhat around the time of Shankara, maybe a little before the time of Shankara, and also after. And the one in particular well known among Buddhists is Vasubandhu, who was a Buddhist scholar who focused on this particular idea of flickers of consciousness. Well, how many people do you know today who follow that Buddhist doctrine, as opposed to how many people do you know today who follow our teachings of Advaita Vedanta? If you ask Buddhists about kshanika vijnana vada, they'll say, what? Because it's not a major teaching among the schools of Buddhism. In the southern school, the Theravada school, it's not taught at all. In the Mahayana tradition, Shunyavada won out over this kshanika vijnana vada, which means this is like, I'm sorry, these are very technical terms, but you get my point, and that is this vijnana vada did not survive the test of time, this doctrine of flickers of consciousness. And the reason is it's subject to refutation in many ways. The most common way of refutation is continuity of memory. We don't experience the world in discrete bits. We experience continuity of I'm improving my words here a little bit. Our experience is one of continuity, and actually I'm pausing because the arguments are quite technical. So when we get into this level of logic, years ago I would make myself read all of this stuff. It's all found in Sanskrit commentaries. Broke my head. Very unpleasant because it's just, they call it shushka tarka, very dry logic. And it goes on and on and on and on. So, and the reason I'm telling you that is I am not an expert in the arguments that dismiss the possibility of this flickers of consciousness. So instead of, since I don't know the arguments, I can't share them with you. If I did research it and share it with you, I don't think you'd enjoy it very much. So that's why what I said before, that doctrine didn't survive the test of time. Why? Okay, now you get it. So this is my shortcut proof. So since kshanika vijnana vada didn't stand the test of time because it was refuted again and again and again, we can trust that scholars greater than us have thoroughly refuted it. I think that's enough said. But you should be aware that, when you get into this level of scholarship, it gets heavy very quickly. And, in spite of my studies, for example, when I study at this level, it's challenging. It's extremely challenging. And to be honest, my heart isn't in it. I know, if I know that Kshanika Vijnanavada has been dismissed by scholars who make me look like this, then why should I break my head trying to reinvent what they've already done? Okay, you get the point. So let's finish up this verse. So this teaching then is based on experience and reasoning. By the way, experience, you may think your experience of deep sleep supports the wrong conclusion that you're unconscious in deep sleep. But you've misinterpreted your experience. Come on. We have to correctly interpret our experience. You're not blind in the dark closet, nor are you unconscious in deep sleep. So just understanding a little bit about the role of experience here. But in addition to experience and logic, what is the third foundation for Vedanta? Is scripture, Shruti. And that's what Shankara refers to here. Nahi drashtuhu iti. Iti is like a quotation mark. So he's quoting from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and this is one of the most powerful statements in any Upanishad, where the Rishi says, Nahi drashtuhu, that's how much Shankara quotes. It continues, drishdehe viparilopaha. He says, for the seer, drashtuhu, seeing, drishtihi, na viparilopaha. There is no loss of seeing. So Shankara here is giving a scriptural basis for the fact that consciousness doesn't blink on and off like your eyes. Consciousness doesn't flicker like the Buddhists think, like some Buddhists think. And consciousness doesn't turn off like the light bulb in your refrigerator. So we have this in addition to properly interpreting our experience, using reasoning, and now according to the ancient rishis. So the rishis had this remarkable ability to understand things that ordinary people couldn't grasp. So according to the wisdom, the revealed knowledge of the ancient rishis, consciousness also is said to be unvarying. Tasmat in the last line. Therefore, drashta, the seer, sada ekadrik. Sada is always. Ekadrik, the uninterrupted seer, unwavering seer. The term that's often used, in fact, even by Shankara, he doesn't use it here, is alupta drik, the seer whose sight is alupta, uninterrupted. Okay, so this is addressing some of the important wrong conclusions about consciousness. And Shankara now continues. So you'll see this atma-vichara, self-inquiry, is very prominent here. He continues. Sanghato vasmi bhutanam, Sanghato vasmi bhutanam, karananam tataiva cha, karananam tataiva cha, vyastam vanyatamo vasmi, vyastam vanyatamo vasmi, ko vasmi tivicharayet, ko vasmi tivicharayet. I just saw a number of people walk in. They may be new, maybe make sure. Are they coming? Okay. All right. So this is how typical who am I inquiry. So he in fact, that's how he ends. Ko in the last line, ko va asmi. Kaha, who va. Kaha va, who among everything else, asmi, am I. Iti vicharayet. Thus you should inquire. You should inquire, ko va asmi, who am I? And then Shankara gives some examples of how you might consider doing this inquiry. At the first line, he says, Sanghataha asmi bhutanam. Va asmi, am I a sanghata, an assemblage, bhutanam, of elements. Physical body, an assemblage of elements. By the way, there's just a side issue here. When I think about this assemblage of elements, you realize that that's not strictly true. It is true. Obviously, it's true. Your body is an assemblage of elements. But from another perspective, your body is made of trillions of living cells. Right? Your body is made of trillions of living cells. So who are you? You are not one from the standpoint of your physical body. There's not one living thing here. There are trillions of living things here. Which one of them is you? You see that logic doesn't work. Anyway, just an interesting perspective. Of course, Shankara won't ask that question. Why? Right? So in ancient times, they didn't know that the body was made of trillions of living cells. If he knew that, perhaps we'd see that right here in this verse. We don't know. Okay, so the inquiry he suggests is, am I a sanghata, an assemblage of elements, karananam tataivacha, or am I an assemblage of karana? Karana here means instrument. It includes senses, and you should know that when we talk about senses in a Vedantic sense, they almost always refer to 6 senses, not 5. But that 6th sense is not some kind of telepathy or something weird like that. The 6th sense, they say again and again, is your mind, antakarana. They say there are 5 karanas, 5 senses pointed out into the world. 1 karana, the antakarana, one of the most common words for mind, which is antaha, focused within. So the question then is, am I an assemblage of elements, or am I an assemblage of these karana, senses and mind? So the first option is really referring to the stula sharira. Am I an assemblage of elements? Or am I the sukshma sharira, an assemblage of the senses and mind? And we can include the prana and karmendriyas and all the components that are said to make up the sukshma sharira. So what am I? Am I the stula sharira? Am I the sukshma sharira, the one that enlivens the physical body? And there are more options here. Vyastam va anyatamaha vasmi. Va asmi, or am I anyatamaha? Vyastam. Am I vyastam, an individual? Anyatamaha, one of them. Am I? First one was sanghata, together. Now we have vyasta, which is the opposite. Sanghata is assemblage. Vyastam means just one. So am I just one? Am I just one of these physical elements? Like modern scientists might say, the essence of who you are is your brain. You could say that. Vyastam. Or one might suggest the essence of who you are is your mind or ego. So these are, he gives now 4 options. So all 4 of these options are going to be examined in the next verse. These are options that you consider in this process of atma-vichara, in the process of self-inquiry. Let's see how he handles that. Vyastam naham samastam va, vyastam naham samastam vya, bhutam indriyameva va, bhutam indriyameva va, nyeyatvat karanatvat cha, nyeyatvat karanatvat cha, Jnatanyosmadghatadivata, Jnatanyosmadghatadivata. Excuse me. So, prior verse was asking the question, now Shankara models for us how we should respond in that process of inquiry. He says, aham, I am na vyastam, I am not an individual, nava, nor am I samastam, I am not an aggregate. I am not an individual or aggregate, of what bhutanam, I am not a single element, brain, nor am I an aggregate of all the parts that make up the body. Similarly, I am not vyastam, an individual indriyam, in the second line, an individual faculty or sense, like the mind, nor am I the samastam indriyam, the whole sukshma sharira, the sum total of that which enlivens your body. So he says, I am none of these. He gave 4 options in the prior verse. He's negated all 4 of them. What is the basis for the negation? So here comes the yukti, the reasoning, the logic, comes in the 3rd line, jneyatvat, because all those are known. Whether it's vyastam or samagram, whether it's individual or an aggregate, whether it's physical bits, cells or elements, or whether it's the subtle aspects, subtle elements, mind and senses, etc. All of these are jnaya, known to you. Physical body, just to understand, it's fairly obvious, but just to make sure we're clear, the physical body is known to you. Anything known to you is not you, knower and known. The moment something is known to you, by definition, it is not you, because you are the knower. The body is known to you, it's not you. How about let's talk about senses, sight. Do you need glasses or not? Now you say, oh, I have to go to my optometrist to find out. He knows. Well, if he knows, then why does he ask you, is this better or is that better? He doesn't know. Only you know how well your eyes are working. So the point is that not only is the physical body known to you, the senses are known to you. That's why he has to ask. And obviously everything happening in your mind is known to you. So this is one of 2 reasons he gives for all of these being anatma, not I. Second reason he gives, karanatvat, because they're instruments. Karana means instrument in the most simple sense. An instrument is like a hammer. A hammer is an instrument. We call it a tool, but we'll call it an instrument. That hammer requires someone to wield it, to use it. Your body exists for its own sake or for the sake of being used. Your body is an instrument. Subtle body also exists, not for its own sake, it is used. You use your five senses, you use your mind. A little bit logical, a little technical, but you get the point. So all of these four different perspectives from the prior verse, all of them are negated because anything known to you is not you. Anything used by you is not you. So these are his arguments. And then he says, he concludes here, Jnata anyaha asmat. Jnata, the knower, is anyaha, different, separate, asmat, from all these. The knower is separate from the known, and he gives our typical example, gatadivat, just like a gata. And a common example given again and again. So anything known to you is not you. And we've been through this. This is, please don't think this is just some kind of simplistic statement. There is so much buried in that. What you think might be simplistic. The pot is known to me. This pot is reddish in color. I look at a red pot and I say, I'm red. It's absurd. The color of the skin is white. And then I say, I'm white. How different is it? If I say I'm white or I say I'm red, the body is known to me in exactly the same way as the pot is known to me. So the point I'm making is don't dismiss this teaching as being overly simplistic. It's very fundamental. It's very important. Let us continue. Oh, again, interesting metaphor here. Atma-vichara buddhir, atma-vichara buddhir. Yes. Avidya kama karma bihi, avidya kama karmihi, dipita prajwalatyesha, dipita prajwalatyesha, dvarai shrotradibi sada, dvarai shrotradibi sada. Okay. Before taking you through that verse, let me help you with the metaphor. There's a central metaphor that'll be used in this verse and the next. The metaphor you've all seen or attended, or at least seen pictures of a yajna, a Vedic ritual, in which a fire is kindled and offerings are made into that sacrificial fire. That is a metaphor for experience, and here's how it works. Fuel, wood, is consumed by the fire. Just like fuel is consumed by the fire, in the same way, mental objects are like the fuel. They are not consumed, they are experienced. So this is a metaphor. So the wood you put into a fire is metaphorically, the fire experiences the wood. Of course, the wood gets burnt in the process. So here we're not talking about an actual consumption or burning. So here, mental objects are like the wood put into the fire. And in this case, those mental objects are configuratively, metaphorically consumed in the sense that they are experienced. Like wood is consumed by the fire, mental objects are experienced due to what? The metaphoric atma-agni, atma-agni, the fire that is atma. So in this metaphor, wood represents mental objects, vrittis, and the fire represents atma in this metaphor. So with that metaphor in mind, we can make sense of this verse and the next one. He says, Shankara says here, end of the first line, buddhihi, mind. By the way, I realized that many people are really fixated on translating buddhi as intellect. And if you're talking about aspects of the mind, definitely we will distinguish between manas and buddhi. They're two very, very different aspects of mind. But right now we're not talking about various aspects of mind. So it seems like, by the way, I'm being fussy about translations right now. Intellect is an overly restrictive translation. I'm boring you with some of the details that translators go through. Better to use a more general term when you're not being very specific. And the more general term, of course, is mind. So just note that when I translate buddhi as mind, it's not because I don't know that buddhi means intellect. In this context, we're not dividing mental faculties. So just in general, mind. And I'm sorry to burden you. This is the stuff I deal with when I translate all this stuff. Okay. Buddhihi, the mind. The mind which is, in the second line, avidya, kama, karma vihi, due to or being accompanied by avidya, ignorance. In our minds, no shortage of ignorance. Kama, desire, that's also present. And karma is willful action. So these three are characteristics of the mind. So that mind is active due to ignorance, desire, and action. So due to ignorance, desire, and action, vrittis arise in your mind, kama and karma. In fact, karma here can refer to the production of vrittis, mental events, the activity of the mind. So due to that activity of the mind, now there are vrittis in the mind which are indhana, which are fuel. Here's our metaphor. Indhana, it represents a wood. So the vrittis that arise in your mind are like the wood that's offered into a fire. And just like fire consumes the wood, what is it that experiences the vrittis in your mind? Atma-agni, the agni of Atma, the fire which is metaphorically represented by Atma. Okay, so this is the first part of the metaphor, but now, let's see. There's something more there, and then it's not coming to me now. Maybe it'll come later. So here, just as food. What in the world am I talking about? Probably wood. Okay, just as wood is consumed by the fire, mental objects are experienced due to consciousness. Oh, that's where it was. Okay. Here's something very important, and I'm going to be fussy about Advaita Vedanta here because this is often overlooked. Consciousness Atma is consciousness, right? Consciousness does not experience the contents of your mind. Whoa? What? Sounds counterintuitive at first. Atma doesn't experience anything. Conscious doesn't experience anything because experience, to be an experiencer, is a particular state or condition. In fact, we call it bhokta, enjoyer. But experiencer would be a better translation. And the point here is that being an experiencer is a condition of your mind. Right now, you're experiencing this class. If you fall asleep, by the way, don't fall asleep, but if you fell deeply asleep during this class, what would you experience? Nothing. So the point here then is that to be an experiencer is a condition of your mind. Watch this. Do you know that you are experiencing this class right now? Do you know that you are an experiencer? How do you know that you are an experiencer? Being an experiencer is known to whom? That's consciousness. Consciousness is that by which even that experiencer, bhokta, is known. So I'm being fussy here because this point is usually ignored, and this metaphor leads you towards this mistake. And you can think that Atma is the experiencer. Atmagni here is the consciousness. That's all it means. Okay, and what about that consciousness? What about that intellect? What about that buddhi? Mind, sorry. That mind, dipita, shines. So you put more wood, not food, more wood you put into that fire, it shines more brightly, right? You put cram more stuff into your mind becomes more active. It shines more brightly. A dull mind has few things going on. A bright mind has a lot of stuff going on. It's full of all these mental activities. So that mind is dipita, shines brightly, and prajwalati, it burns, it shines, it radiates, it illumines. Esha connects to buddhi. This buddhi, this mind, shines brightly, and now comes an interesting expression. It shines brightly, dwaraihi, through the doorways. And this concept of doorway refers to our senses. So eyes are two doorways, ears are two doorways, nostrils are two more, mouth is one more. So these are doorways through which we connect ourselves to the world around us. If you couldn't see, hear, taste, smell, or touch, you would have no connection whatsoever to the world. So through these dwaras, these doorways which open us to the world around us, and these doorways, shrotradibihi, these doorways such as shrotra, hearing, seeing, taste, smell, and touch, due to all these doorways, sada, the mind is always shining through these senses. You, right now, have the experience directly of the contents of your mind. And you have the experience indirectly of me and everything around you. All of that is experienced by you. So the contents of your mind are experienced directly, and whatever is around you outside is experienced indirectly. And this idea, yeah, we've got time. This idea then is concluded in the next verse. Let's just see that. Nope, wrong way. This way. Dakshina pradhaneshu yada buddhir vicheshtate vishayar havisha deepta atmagnasthula bhuktada atmagnasthula bhuksara. Before looking at the first half, in pre-scientific times, they had a very different concept of how eyesight worked. In fact, all the senses. So nowadays we know, the photons of light bounce off my body and strike your eyeball. They get focused on the retina. That gets turned into electrical impulses up your optic nerve to the part of your brain concerned with sight. What did Shankaracharya know about all this stuff? What is photons? None of this was known in ancient times. So they had a pre-scientific model of how eyesight and all the senses work. And the way they considered it is the mind, very interesting actually, the mind being subtle, that which is subtle, and our word sukshma or subtle means having no physicality. That which has no physicality has no size, has no dimensions, right? So, if your mind has no size or dimension, it's not necessarily trapped inside your skull, right? This is their logic, and you can't talk. Logic is good. We don't agree with it in modern times, but the logic is solid. So what they believed was your mind exits, actually the term they use is your mind stretches out from your eyeballs towards an object. Your mind contacts that object, and that's how the vritti is produced in your mind. When your mind contacts the object, your mind takes the shape of that object, and your mind can do that because you can't keep it stuck. It can flow out, as it were, through any sense. Here we're talking about sight. So in the second line, yada, when, buddhihi, mind, vicheshtate, when it moves, when it leaves sense organs, and in particular, we're talking about eyes. And here's another feature of this ancient worldview. First line, dakshinakshi pradhaneshu. It leaves pradhaneshu primarily through the dakshina akshi. This is not dakshina, this is dakshina, right, the right eye. Yeah, what is this? It's part of an ancient worldview. Interesting. Even today, right-handedness is more common than left-handedness. So they presumed that there's something special about the right side of the body, and so must be something special about the right eye. And there's some ancient scriptures which also talk about this. Anyway, so this is the ancient worldview. Your mind stretches out primarily through your right eye, contacts that which you're seeing, The mind assumes the form of whatever it's contacted, and that mind is not just out there, it's simultaneously in here, so you experience that. That's how they explained it. And now back to our metaphor of the fire, he says, when that happens, Vishayaihi, and this is the third line, Vishayaihi deep, deep da. Your mind is deep da. It is illumined. It becomes active, Vishayaihi, due to the objects it has perceived. Your mind becomes active, and our metaphor once again, just like havisha, just like havis is the sacrificial offerings, often ghee. Not always, but often ghee. So just like that havisha, the offerings made into that sacrificial fire are that cause that fire. And here's the metaphor. When you've seen this, you put that ghee in the fire, melted butter, that fire quickly climbs up, expands. So your mind is like that. You feed your mind stuff. And I guess today with all this media, we're exposed to, our minds are fed this constant stream of media which stimulates the mind. So that stimulated mind here is called deep da. It shines brightly due to what? Atma-agni. Back to our metaphor. The mind shines with the light or fire of Atma. But once again, in fact here, this really leads to it. Look at the language. And here Shankara is using the language from the famous Mandukya Upanishad. He says here, Atma-agnihi, this consciousness is tada, at that time, consciousness is stula bhuk. It is the bhuk, the experiencer of stula physical objects. This is right out of this famous Mandukya Upanishad. Atma becomes stula bhuk, the experiencer of material things. Let's go back to our other argument, or our earlier discussion. Does Atma truly experience anything? And we'll return to a joke you've heard here before, and that is, Atma doesn't do anything, leading to my guru's joke, therefore Atma is good for nothing. But it's important. Atma doesn't do anything. To illumine or reveal the contents of your mind is not an action. This light is illumining my body. What is it doing? It just shines. For a light to shine is not to be engaged in an activity. Similarly, there's plenty of activity in your mind. Atma is not engaged in that activity. Rather, Atma reveals that activity. And this is a very, very important point being made here. But we'll end with this verse. What Shankara is saying, this is our whole process of atma-vichara, self-inquiry. So what Shankara is concluding here then is consciousness reveals the activities of your mind. Now again, we saw this before, and you say, well, that sounds so obvious. This is kind of Vedanta 101. No, it's a fundamental, yes, but to call it simple or obvious is not correct. Look at this. This light shines on my body. How is the light affected by what it shines on? Does the light become tainted by orangeness? Doesn't affect the light whatsoever. Whatever this light shines upon doesn't affect the light whatsoever. This is so central to the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. whatever consciousness reveals in your mind, consciousness is not affected at all. Think about it. Whenever sadness arises in your mind, suppose you could adopt this perspective. And that is, yes, sadness is present in my mind, and I, the conscious observer of that sadness, I am not affected by that sadness. It's not so hard. You can do that. You can get it. It's the term we've used before, healthy detachment. You are the conscious observer of the sadness in your mind. Notice we're not negating the sadness. That's psychologically unhealthy to not deal with emotional realities. You have to deal with the emotional reality of sadness and the causes for that sadness. But it is crucial to know that fundamentally you are utterly unaffected by that sadness in your mind. Unchanging consciousness. Okay, good place to conclude. We'll continue next week. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.